This is a private story of mine that honestly to me is scarier than any paranormal experience I had over the years. I'm a true believer that no one is truly born evil, but after encountering this girl and remembering what she did, I'm questioning it. A fair warning for anyone listening who's triggered by mentions of sexual assault or abuse. I advise to maybe skip this story if it upsets you. I won't go into detail about the situation entirely due to YouTube restrictions, but to this day, it scares me, especially since the person got away with it, and I still see them occasionally. At the time this happened, I was in second grade, and at the time, I was a lonely little girl. I only have one friend, and even they were drifting away from me after some kid drama. You know the type of drama that is. I admit that I was a naive kid, and even after me already being picked on by classmates before, I still thought the world was puppies and rainbows. How, I even believed Pokemon were secretly real at the time. So when I finally caught the attention of someone who actually wanted to be my friend, I was ecstatic. It was around September, I think, that this person started talking to me. Her name was Morgan. She was a school athlete that was way taller and stronger than I was. I was waiting in the lunch line, and Morgan walked up and said warm hellos and asked me my name. I simply stated my name, and the kids started talking about things that I liked, like Danny Phantom, SpongeBob, Pokemon, and other shows. Going on about how she got into them because of me, and she'd love to talk to me more about it. Cliché, I know, but keep in mind, I was a very naive child who was very lonely, so hearing this made my heart jump with joy. We sat at lunch and began talking about the stated things, probably correcting her a couple of times about wrong information, but other than that, I was a happy kid. 2 weeks went by, and during lunch, Morgan asked me if I would like to join a club. Again, I was really excited and asked about it. Morgan simply said the Tutti Frutti Club. It'll be just me and you. However, you have to do one thing for me. She did this hand motion that I know now is kind of similar to the Vulcan greeting, but she moved her fingers individually. Picture the Newton balls. It was similar to that motion. I can't really describe it accurately. I wasn't very coordinated, so I failed the first time, and then Morgan pinched my arm. No, like this. She did the hand motion again, and once again I failed. She pinched me. She did this all until I did it right at the end of lunch. When I finally did it correctly, she smiled and hugged me. Great, now we can start the club. We meet every Friday during recess. You know, the back of that really big field. It's worth mentioning that we had a huge grassy play field that was usually used for only field days, but at recess, kids could play on it. However, it was big enough and over a hill that if you went all the way to the back, you wouldn't be seen. I was aware of this, but I thought this club was supposed to be secret, so it made sense to me. I nodded, and she said that that's where we will meet. No matter what, I should always meet there. I regret to this day that I joined that freaking club. That Friday, I met up with her, seeing her face at the back of the field lot. I ran to greet her and she smiled. We talked for a bit. Then she seems mad. You were supposed to bring a stuffed animal. I was confused and told her she didn't tell me to bring one. When we last spoke, and she growled and proceeded to say that she did, and that I'm a bad friend. I was hurt and told her I might have forgotten and tried to have this. She continued yelling at me, saying that the reason I had no friends was because I don't listen and I never pay attention. After she seemingly calmed down, she hugged me and said that she's sorry and that I just pushed her over the line to say those things. After a moment of hugging, she pretended to be having an epiphany and went, "You need to learn to listen the hard way. I know just the thing. Next Friday, I know a thing that can help you." She said that I was just clueless and struggled with listening, and said next time I should bring an extra shirt. This, honestly, was the beginning of the torture she put me through. I'd go into detail, but I don't want to make it more upsetting than this already is. That following Friday, she put the wet shirt against my nose and mouth and forced me to stare at the sun while pinning me down. This wasn't the worst thing, however. She'd ask me to bring a belt, and she'd smack my stomach and back hard with it until I cried. She'd choke me. And the worst thing is, She would ask me to find a stick, and she did something unspeakable that I don't want to mention. She called me retarded whenever I forgot or purposely didn't bring something that I should have brought. And after she was done teaching me, she hugged me, cry, and then say it was hard for her to see her best friend hurt. This kid was a fucking psychopath. And one time, I purposely hid in the bathroom and somehow she knew where I lived. She threatened to kill my dog and beat up my little sister so badly, and I quote, that she won't have any more teeth and that'll be your fault. You may be asking why I didn't go for help or tell a teacher. The truth is, she scared me so much that I was afraid to do those things because I didn't want her to hurt my sister or dog. It didn't help that we both went on the same bus as well. This continued until April, near the end of the year, when I broke down crying in a classroom and was ushered to a counselor. Even then, I didn't tell the woman the whole truth. You have to keep in mind, I was terrified of this girl. And that one time she showed me exactly what my house looked like. Even after only telling the counselor she called me horrible names and physically hurt me, she still only got off with a warning, which made it worse until the end of the year. The year after that, she transferred schools and I didn't hear of her until 8th grade. When I saw her and was told I was going to be in a group with her, I broke down crying, asking the teacher to take me out of the group. I sometimes wake up from a nightmare that she came into my house as an adult and killed my dog and my sister, smiling from the yard with her tutti frutti hand signal. People aren't born evil, but this girl is the exception. I don't wish death on her or others, but I hope this bitch dies a slow, painful death for what she did to a naive child, ruining their trust in any relationship for the rest of their life.
Though this story may seem grand to some, this story is as true as I am. When I was 17, my mother moved to a small town in Choiceland, Saskatchewan. The whole time, my mother and her partner were buying and cultivating the yard next to their house. While my mother was tilling the soil they had just purchased, a swarm of ground wasps engulfed her entire left arm and shoulder. Though it's not unheard of, it is what happened, and it was next to unusual. Obviously, excited and uncertain, my mom ran to the house to begin the removal of the stingers. When she opened the door and climbed the 3 stairs to the kitchen, she noticed that all the cupboard doors were wide open. She quickly dismissed this due to her current condition. It was not until 2 mornings later, when she woke up early and the house was still dark, that she came down the hallway towards the kitchen, only to hit her head on a cupboard. When she turned on the light, she noticed that all the cupboards were open. When her partner awoke, she described both occurrences to them. When her partner woke, she described both occurrences to him. He dismissed it being a cat, though my mother did not have a cat. He was 19 years old and had trouble getting on the couch, let alone climbing into the counters. As time passed, my mother noticed when she would wake, she would usually find the cupboards open, and on many occasions the pictures on the walls would be moved around. Perhaps one of the earliest and strangest occurrences was that she had some tomato plants growing under some plant lights in the basement bedroom, waiting to be planted. It occurred to her that this bedroom was much too cold for these plants. When she went back on to check on them, they were covered in ice. This prompted her to put a small space heater on the floor below them, but to no avail, the plants would continue to be covered in ice. Needless to say, she did not have tomatoes that year. That room was always ice cold, but the cat Bart, whom I mentioned before, refused to go in that room. In fact, he rarely ventured down to the basement unless accompanied. It also seemed whoever was doing these things was quite old-fashioned. My mother acquired a job at the bar in town and had a few favorite shirts she liked to wear, though one night she could not find one of her more provocative tops. After searching for a couple of days, she gave up, thinking maybe her partner did not approve. It was not until she went to heat up some leftovers in the microwave that she found it folded neatly inside. It seems that would become the more favored hiding place for this thing to stash things. When her partner's 2 daughters came to visit was when things got quite apparent that something was going on. Let me just say, now that these girls are quite unsavory, and if you were any self-respecting person, you would not want to know them. One sister and her partner were asked to sleep in the basement room, while the other couple slept up in the spare room. In the morning, when they woke up, they noticed that the furniture in the basement had been turned to face the wall, as if to tell them they were not welcome to sit and stay. Now, I can tell you from experience that the hide-a-bed that was in the basement was quite difficult to move. The girls were quite excited about this and wanted to go into town library, then the records hall, to see if they could find anything on the house. But when they went to put their shoes on, they could not be found. Remembering her shirts, my mother told them to check the microwave, and, to no surprise, they were there. Now, you can believe me or not in what I'm about to tell you next, but my accounts are as accurate as I can remember. I have been considered somewhat of a spiritual beacon. There have been many, many instances that I have been singled out, though some of those will be saved for other stories. Now, during this Christmas of 2000, I made the trip to Choiceland to visit her mother. My first night, as I was sitting up watching some late-night television, I heard somebody walking up the stairs. My mother's house was old and at the top of 3 stairs that led from the porch to the kitchen. There was a very loud, distinctive creak. For the next hour, that creak was all I heard. As if somebody was standing there shifting their weight, but I never saw anyone. The next day, my mother and I were making a roast. As we were cutting up vegetables, we could watch the oven dial slowly turning up. We had to yell at him to stop this, after we would not want to burn it down. He seemed to change things out of the house, more so than usual. Then came the whistling. You could hear it as plain as day, though I could not remember the tune. He would whistle all day in the basement, and the only time it would stop is when my mother's partner would come home for work. My mother told me that he was much more active while I was there. He even seemed to want to invite me into his room. Now, working at the bar, my mother was usually gone at night, so I would sit downstairs in front of the computer. Often, the door to the bedroom would be wide open, followed by a great chill. What was quite odd, as I had forgone using the computer chair for a large high-back chair they had sitting in the corner. This chair they had originally planned on putting in the bedroom in the basement, but after a few attempts they realized that it would not fit. But one night I went downstairs to use the computer, only to notice that that chair was missing. I looked all over the basement for it, but it was not until I looked in the spare room that I found it. We actually had to take it apart to get it out of that room. We found out that there had been a young man named Dennis that lived there. In his mid-30s, he had died in that house after a long battle with cancer. He had moved his room to the basement because it was cool down there, and he often suffered from fevers. Fortunately, my mother no longer resides in that house, but there are many times we would wonder if anyone else had experiences with Dennis. Though I have only mentioned half of the things that occurred in that house, I think now you can understand that we know that this house was haunted, and we are very grateful for the experiences we had there. I'm from a small town in Ito. I'm always camping, swimming in lakes, and I'm very familiar with the mountains. One day in 2015, me and my family decided to go up to the mountains for the 4th of July. We didn't have a big family. It was just me, my mom, and my 2 siblings. My sister was 3 and my older brother was 17. I was 15 at the time. Me and my brother both shared a tent while my mom and little sister had a little trailer that only fit one. I never liked this campsite. It's always been darker in a way, like the air wasn't so free. It was all musk or, in a way, tense. Well, we were really deep in the forest area. This campsite was shut down in 2013, so we took the chance to save money and go to an abandoned campsite for the hell of it. We once went there back before it shut down. There were no bathrooms, no water, and no one was around. It was nice and quiet. Me and my brother decided to check out the sights. When we were about 10 minutes away from the camp, we came across an old cabin. It was a very old and abandoned cabin. Being myself, I wanted to go inside. It took my brother a good 5-minute argue to let me go. When he finally agreed, we headed inside. It was all torn down. It wasn't very small. It was like a regular or medium-sized house. It was all ruins, though. I noticed one drawing on the wall that somehow stood out from all the others. It was like a bull and a human, long arms and long legs. It had a saying like, "They are watching, they see you now. Once theirs, now yours to suffer." Those words gave me chills. I watched so many scary movies that I just ignored it. It's a very scary looking house. There is always going to be that one creepy artist willing to give you a good scare from it. After taking a closer look at the artwork, we decided to go upstairs. The cabin was mostly empty. When we got upstairs, it was like a loft, a pair of stairs that led to one huge room. Like the whole room was upstairs. It was completely empty, except there was just one little box in the middle of the room which was empty. This is when it gets kind of fuzzy in my notebook. It had 2 horses in it. I was very curious, so I opened it, and to my surprise, there was a couple of photos inside. I only remember 3 of the pictures. I know there were more though. One had a picture of a little family. It was black and white. A little girl, she looked like she was between 4 to 6 years old, had a big smile. There was a lady holding 2 toddlers. They didn't look like infants. They were old enough to sit up when she was holding them on her hips. They all had huge smiles. Then there was a man. He had a compelling look. He wasn't smiling like the others. He had no hair. He was standing in front of them in a way. Like, I couldn't see the others' outfits because of a shadow. I remember he had an axe in one hand, and he was holding the little girl's hand. In the background, there was a forest, like the same one I'm in now. Same cabin. It had flowers, a little stone path, and there wasn't any writing on it, of course, and the roof wasn't broken. The other picture was more interesting and way more chilling. There was a picture of the land that the camp was in now. So, the abandoned camp. I could see the little landmark that told you where you are. In this picture, the man had the little girl on his back. She had the same smile and the guy had the same face as the other picture. There were little rocks and houses everywhere. Like a mini town. Behind the man, you could see a little pathway of rocks with a red stain on it. I personally thought it was blood. You could see dead animals such as deer, rats, and everything else, but I couldn't really tell. I really don't remember much of the third. This time, it was 2 toddlers. They seemed to be sitting in a pool of water outside. The water went to their neck. I remember this one being really creepy. I just can't remember the creepy part. It's odd. I remember the water being a dark red color, and that's about it. I wanted to give these to a local museum, so I stuck them in my dress pocket. Let's just say, that was a huge mistake. By the time we got back to the camp, it was dark. I remember eating a hot dog and s'mores, telling scary stories, then heading to the tents to catch some Z's. I woke up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. My tent, let's say, if I was running, I would be at the mountainside in just 5 minutes. I was walking to find a place to go to the bathroom, and when I was about to squat down, I saw something bright. It was like a light behind a tree. When I took a look, I started hearing the sound of chains. I was literally about to pee myself. It really didn't help that I was literally squatting down to go to the bathroom. It looked like a person, but I couldn't see anything or any features. It was the shape I could see. I think it noticed me. I was shaking, dead quiet, my hand still on the rim of my pajama pants. I was shocked. I couldn't move. It started to slowly move backwards. It was making light, noises, and I could hear slowly going away. I watched it as it got faster and started running up the mountain backward, like up a hill in almost a 90 freaking degree angle. It was so steep you couldn't even climb it with ropes. I was about to crap myself. When I got to the very top, they seemingly just disappeared. I woke up everyone after this, and we packed up and left. I threw the pictures out the window, not even caring anymore.
This happened about 2 to 3 years ago. I live in northwestern Montana, and it was my senior year summer. I was going through some personal stuff that year, and I thought the best way to escape from that for now was to get off the grid and go camping in the forest. My plan was to go on a hiking trail that not a lot of people hiked and get to the small campsite. I packed my gear that everyone brings on hiking trips: food, water, tents, bear spray, etc. When I left, it was after work and it took a couple of hours to reach the beginning of the hiking trail. The hike was 10 miles into the forest, which had winding paths, rocky areas, and thick and overgrown brush that at times was hard to see the trail because of how overgrown the trail has become with the lack of people using it. The trail just leads you deeper into the mountains. The hike was pretty uneventful until I reached the campground. When you come out of the trail into the campground, the first thing you see is just a small open area, about 30 to 50 feet, so just enough to hold a couple of tents. When you look out in front of you, you can see a small lake with trees packed together tight that it's hard to see through, and right above, there are rocky mountains sticking up high in position to where the sun goes over. Surrounding the area are pine trees, making it hard to see more than 20 feet in front of you. When I reached the campground, I set up my tent right away because the sun was going down fast, and with the mountains, it grows dark very quickly. And since I haven't had anything to eat yet, I get a fire going and put some food on. Here's where it starts to begin. Night all came. The night was calm, and just a breeze was coming through, and it felt really nice. It was coming in very slightly, making the trees just move enough to where it starts to make croaking noises. The night was pretty chilly, and I made a pretty fire, and about an hour into the night, I get this foul smell that just seemed to linger. It must have been coming from the wind, and it made its way to me, I think. But the smell was so strong and felt like it was right next to me. I threw another log onto the fire, and I hear this scream of what sounded like a woman next to me, coming from the direction the wind was coming from. I think, anyway. This freaked the hell out of me, because I thought I was the only person here, because I didn't see any other tents around, and there's no place to set up tents other than the spot I'm in. The scream didn't come from the trail I came from either. The visibility that night came from the campfire and the moon reflecting off the lake, so I couldn't see very far. But I reached into my backpack and pulled out a flashlight and just slowly started scanning the area for the woman. I yelled back, "Are you okay? What's wrong?" And the woman yelled back, "Help me!" So I said, "Where are you? Are you hurt?" Trying to find the source of the sound. There was a small pause when the woman yelled back, "Come here!" But there was something off about the voice, and I was thinking to myself, the woman didn't sound like she was hurting or anything was attacking her. So that raised a red flag in my mind, and everything I said seemed like it didn't matter to the woman, like she was trying to lure me out of the campsite with the same two words, "Help me," and "Come here." Right after that, I reached into my backpack and pulled out my handgun and kept scanning the forest. After a bit, I could hear far in the distance, elk making noises, and right after, that same direction, the girl was yelling at me. I heard some sort of screech coming and then some movement in the direction of the elk, when the bushes moving violently until the bushes became unmoving and the campground became still again. After the thing ran away, the foul smell went away with it, and through the rest of the night it was calm except for the same screeching in the distance, which sounded like it was miles away, just echoing through the mountains. I have never been more scared in my life, so I waited until dawn, packed up my things, and headed home. I haven't told anyone my story, but if you have any idea what this could be, please let me know. And thank you for taking the time to read my story. Growing up in a small rural Vermont town meant that my household didn't have a lot of money, but we still shared everything we had with our extended family. That included letting my aunt, uncle, and cousin move in with us when they got evicted from their house. Everything was just fine until the crying started. For 2 years, from age 12 to 14, I had to share a room with my little cousin Katie. It wasn't all bad, since she was close enough to my age that she wasn't a pest, but I hated the blackout curtains we had to hang so that any outside light wouldn't keep her up at night. I loved seeing the moonlight filter through the screen in the summer, and I missed that once Katie moved in. It was the second year that they had been living with us when the crying began. At first, I thought it was Katie sobbing quietly when she thought I was asleep, which made sense to me because she had gotten dumped a few days before. I figured she just didn't want to talk because she was ashamed of being the one that got dumped, or she was still just too heartbroken. Over the next few weeks, however, I began realizing that it was coming from different places within our room at night. I couldn't understand why Katie was continuing to cry so much, and anytime I asked her about it, she just looked scared and shook her head. I thought something else had happened between her and her ex-boyfriend, but she just wouldn't talk to me. I told my mom and aunt about it one night while Katie was out at her friend Bree's house, but they just shrugged it off and said that we were going through a rough time. My slightly drunk aunt joked that Katie was probably crying at night because my fashion sense was so bad, and that maybe we should try a nightlight if we were going to be such babies. I ignored her and decided that I was done with the whole thing. Things came to a head about a month after I talked to my mom and aunt about it. I was trying to sleep one night, my CD player earbuds lodged firmly in my ears, when I got a gentle tug on my pajama sleeve. I removed my earbuds, turning my face to Katie, even though I couldn't actually see her in the darkness. "What's up?" Instead of the answer, all I got was a sniffle. And before I knew what was happening, Katie had crawled into bed and curled up next to me. This was so out of character for her that I didn't even question it. I just gently stroked her hair. She quieted down for a bit, and I covered her with my spare blanket because she was so cold. I must have fallen asleep at some point, because I woke up to Katie moving around next to me. She leaned over, her soft whisper barely reaching my ears. "Right, Autocopy is coming." I had no idea what she meant. I felt her get off the bed, and everything was still and silent again. I strained my eyes to make out what was happening in the pitch-like darkness. But, with the blackout curtains, I couldn't tell where she had gone. "Kitty, who's coming? You're gripping me out." She never responded. A primordial growl sliced through the quiet, and a white-hot pain blurred my senses. I screamed as wet, warm liquid ran down my face, and a single hand snaked its way around my throat. I tried to kick out at Katie, but my feet didn't seem to be able to connect with anything. The air was rapidly being squeezed from my lungs, and no matter how hard I tried, it was impossible for me to tear free from the vice-like hand. I was about to pass out when my door was flung open and my father stood there. The hand had released my throat, and after a moment of catching my breath, I realized it was just my father and I in the room. He shouted to my mom to call an ambulance. Then he tried asking me what happened. I frantically begged him to search the room, but there was no one else there. There wasn't even a closet to hide in. The window was locked from the inside. I ended up passing out from losing so much blood, and I also lost my left eye that night. The doctors tried to blame it on a mixture of sleep paralysis, nightmares, and accidental self-harm. But at 120 pounds and no muscle, even my parents didn't believe that explanation. We moved out of that house immediately, since none of us felt comfortable there anymore. On the night I lost my eye, Katie came to see me in the intensive care unit. As soon as her mom picked her up from her boyfriend's house, I almost was asleep in my bed, and I remember her leaning over and whispering to me, her voice heavy with sorrow, "I'm sorry, cuz. I wish I would have been there to help you." Even in my drug-induced, mostly asleep state, it struck me that her whisper didn't sound at all like the one that had tried to warn me about the attack. I have never had a strange experience again. And when we moved, I even got my own room. Since then, I never fail to make sure there's some sort of light in the room. On those rare nights when I hear crying, I always make sure to leave the house for a while. I never did figure out who warned me, or why they did that, but I'm forever grateful to them. If they hadn't woken me, when they did, I believe I could have been caught off guard to fight back at all, and I would have lost more than just my eye. So thankful to still be breathing, and I make sure to always whisper goodnight to my unseen savior.